The announcement came 5 minutes ago, yet the ripple is already unstoppable. The palace, usually a fortress of composure and tradition, was caught off guard, blindsided by a decision that would forever alter the trajectory of one of the most scrutinized women in modern history. King Charles, the monarch who has long carried the weight of centuries-old expectations on his shoulders, has confirmed a choice that few saw coming, and even fewer are prepared to digest. Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, has been stripped of all royal titles and privileges. The words are simple. The impact is seismic. For decades, the royal family has been viewed through the lens of ceremony, protocol, and unyielding tradition. But moments like these expose the tension beneath the gilded exterior, the human drama, the betrayal, the family fractures that no publicist or palace statement can mask. And now, it is Meghan's life that hangs in the balance, exposed to scrutiny like never before. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine, for a moment, the weight of being Meghan Markle. You enter the palace as a celebrated actress, a woman whose story is already the subject of global fascination. Your wedding is broadcast around the world. You are the embodiment of modern royalty, breaking norms, introducing Hollywood glamour into centuries-old British tradition. Yet behind the glittering gowns and smiling photographs, the pressures mount. Every smile, every gesture, every word is dissected by millions. Every alliance you make is questioned. Every move you take is framed as either loyalty or rebellion. And then comes the ultimate test. Not a scandal in the tabloids, not whispers in the corridors of Kensington Palace, but a direct confrontation with the institution itself. King Charles, your father-in-law, your sovereign, the man who represents continuity, tradition, and authority, delivers a verdict that changes everything. The titles that once defined your identity within the royal framework, titles earned through marriage, status, and recognition, are gone. The privileges, the security, the ceremonial respect, all withdrawn in a single act of royal decree. But why now? Why, after years of speculation, after months of tension between the Sussexes and the palace, does this final decision come today? The answer is layered, tangled with personal grievances, public perception, and strategic timing. The palace is a machine of appearances, of calculated releases, of narratives managed meticulously for centuries. And yet, even this time, the narrative is leaking through the cracks, revealing a story more complex than any press release could ever convey. To understand the magnitude of this moment, you must step back and look at Meghan's journey through the lens of both history and human emotion. She is not the first outsider to challenge the insular traditions of the monarchy, nor will she be the last. But what sets her apart is the speed and intensity of her scrutiny, the global obsession that surrounds her, and the undeniable tension she created simply by existing in that space. Every move she made was a statement, intentional or not, and every action seemed to ripple outward, impacting the family, the media, and the public in ways few could predict. Think about the headlines, the late-night analyses, the social media debates that rage across continents. Why is Meghan Markle being targeted? Is the monarchy too rigid for modern life? Has the Sussex family gone too far? These are not just idle questions. They are the reflection of a global conversation, one that King Charles's decision has now made impossible to ignore. And while the public consumes the story with a mix of fascination and judgment, the private stakes could not be higher. Inside the palace, the atmosphere is electric with tension. Advisors whisper in corridors, texts are sent in hushed urgency, and long-standing relationships are tested. Every decision that reaches the public is rooted in countless hours of deliberation behind closed doors, deliberation that shapes the narrative, the perception, and the very legacy of the monarchy. And yet, despite all this preparation, the announcement itself carries a raw, unfiltered impact that no amount of planning could fully contain. But this is not just about titles and privileges. It is about legacy, identity, and the very idea of belonging. For Meghan, this decision is a public confirmation that she is no longer part of the inner circle, no longer shielded by protocol, no longer recognized as a representative of the crown. For the monarchy, it is a signal of authority, of boundaries maintained, and of a tradition that refuses compromise, even in the face of modernity and global scrutiny. The emotional weight cannot be overstated. Picture Meghan, reading the official statement, feeling the words resonate not just in her career, but in her personal identity. Titles are not just ceremonial. They are markers of belonging, of connection, of history. Stripped of them, she faces a new reality, one in which her every action is now outside the framework of royal expectation, observed and critiqued with a lens sharper than ever before. And yet, despite the gravity of the moment, there is a story still unfolding, one that the public has yet to fully grasp. What led to this decision? How did internal palace dynamics, personal grievances, and media scrutiny converge to create this watershed moment? And perhaps most importantly, what will Meghan do next? Her response, strategic or emotional, will shape the next chapter not just of her life, but of the monarchy itself. We cannot ignore the timing, either. In an era dominated by social media, every announcement is instant, every reaction global. The world watched as this news broke, reactions pouring in by the thousands. Supporters and critics alike flooded timelines, analyzing every word, every pause, every implication. But behind the headlines, behind the viral posts, lies a deeper narrative, one that cannot be summarized in a tweet or a news clip. It is a story of family tension, of loyalty tested, and of decisions that will echo for years to come. And it is precisely this story we are about to unfold. A story that traces Meghan Markle's path from celebrated bride to controversial figure, from insider to outsider, and from privilege to a public reckoning. Along the way, we will explore the forces at play: King Charles's motivations, Prince Harry's role, palace advisors' influence, and the hidden dynamics that have shaped this unprecedented decision. But what is perhaps most compelling of all is the human element. Titles and privileges are, at the end of the day, symbols. The real story is about people, about relationships strained by expectation, about trust broken by perceived betrayal, and about ambition colliding with tradition. It is about Meghan Markle navigating a world that has never fully accepted her, and a monarchy striving to preserve itself in the face of public scrutiny and internal upheaval. So ask yourself, what would you do if the world you built around you was suddenly stripped away? How would you respond if the very institution that once celebrated you now declared you unrecognized, unwelcome, and unprotected? And more importantly, what happens next when titles are gone, privileges rescinded, and the spotlight refuses to move on? But the answer is not simple, because while King Charles's announcement is final, the story is far from over. Behind the formal statement lies a network of secrets, private conversations, and strategic moves that could change everything. And as we delve deeper into this saga, we will uncover the moments, the decisions, and the shocking revelations that have led us to this unprecedented point. In fact, what comes next may be even more dramatic than the announcement itself. There are whispers of meetings that took place away from public eyes, documents that reveal intentions never meant to be known, and actions by Meghan and those around her that could alter the course of her life forever. The palace may have delivered its verdict, but the human story, the emotional fallout, the personal calculations, the ripple effect, has only just begun. And so we ask again, can Meghan Markle survive this? Can she redefine herself outside the confines of royalty? Or has the palace's decision set in motion a chain of events that will be impossible to reverse? The answers lie ahead, in the chapters to come, as we peel back the layers of intrigue, drama, and emotion surrounding one of the most shocking announcements in modern royal history. The palace had barely settled into its usual rhythm that morning when the news broke. It was 5 minutes past a time that would soon be remembered as historic, a time stamped in digital memory as millions of screens around the world lit up with the same headline. King Charles has confirmed that Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, is to be stripped of all royal titles and privileges. The words themselves seemed almost unreal, like a plotline ripped straight from a thriller or a dramatic Hollywood script. But this was no fiction. It was real, and it hit with the force of a lightning bolt striking the heart of the monarchy. The announcement was brief, almost clinical in its wording, but its implications were monumental. To the casual observer, it may have appeared as a simple statement, a line of text issued through the palace press office. But for anyone who understood the weight of protocol, the centuries of tradition underpinning the British royal family, and the intricacies of public perception, it was seismic. Suddenly, Meghan's position, which had once seemed untouchable to the casual media eye, was revealed to be far more precarious than anyone had realized. Immediately, social media exploded. Within seconds, thousands of comments, tweets, and posts were shared, debated, and dissected. Memes appeared almost instantaneously, some mocking, some sympathetic, and others filled with incredulity. The hashtag Meghan stripped of titles trended worldwide within minutes. Viewers from London to Los Angeles were glued to screens, replaying news segments, analyzing every pause in the announcement, every inflection in the royal spokesperson's voice. The global reaction was a mix of shock, outrage, and morbid curiosity. People wanted to know why, how, and, most importantly, what this meant for the future of Meghan Markle and the royal family. But the real story lay not in the public reaction, but in the context that had led to this moment. Anyone familiar with the palace knew that such an announcement is never made lightly. Every word is debated, every nuance considered, every possible outcome imagined. This decision, though publicly framed as a resolution, was the product of months of internal deliberation, weeks of private meetings, and countless conversations behind closed doors. The message was clear. The monarchy was drawing a line, and Meghan Markle had crossed it in a way that could no longer be overlooked. Inside the palace walls, the mood was electric intense. Advisors scurried between offices, documents shuffled across polished desks, and phones buzzed with urgent messages from courtiers, lawyers, and aides. Every detail of Meghan's past actions, public statements, and professional projects had been reviewed meticulously. Security, finances, public image, and family dynamics were all part of the calculus. To those on the inside, this announcement was less of a surprise and more of a calculated inevitability. But even they could not predict the scale of the global reaction that would follow. For Meghan Markle, the announcement was a turning point. One moment, she was Duchess of Sussex, a royal with privileges and ceremonial status recognized by the crown. The next, her titles were stripped, and with them came a cascade of consequences she would have to navigate immediately. Imagine receiving such a notice, not in a private meeting or discreet phone call, but through an official public declaration, knowing that every news outlet, every social media feed, and every conversation around the world was now scrutinizing your every move. The pressure is almost unimaginable. The timing of the announcement was strategic. Observers noted that it came shortly after a series of high-profile events. Meghan's recent media appearances, the rumors of new Netflix projects, and the ongoing discussions about her role in public and private royal life. The palace had waited until a moment when the story would maximize public impact, and the world would pay attention. It was a calculated move that signaled both authority and finality. But with strategy comes consequence. The news immediately sparked debate, conspiracy theories, and speculation about what had truly led to this unprecedented decision. Public reactions were polarizing. In the UK, reactions ranged from applause at the perceived upholding of royal tradition to outrage at what some called an unnecessary public humiliation. Across the Atlantic, American audiences were equally divided. Some saw it as a betrayal of a woman who had faced relentless media scrutiny and systemic pressures, while others argued that royal privilege comes with rules that Meghan had allegedly ignored. Analysts, historians, and journalists quickly weighed in, offering commentary that blended fact, rumor, and interpretation. Every angle was explored, every implication considered, but the true story, the one of personal stakes and family dynamics, remained largely hidden. Behind the headlines, the personal stakes were immense. Prince Harry, Meghan's husband, found himself thrust into an impossible position. Loyalty, love, and duty collided in a storm of public scrutiny and private anguish. What could a son do when a father, the king, declares a ruling that directly impacts the woman he loves? How could Harry balance personal devotion with the expectations of the crown? These were not theoretical questions. They were immediate, pressing realities that would shape the coming days, weeks, and months. The global media had a field day. Every network, Newspaper and digital outlets scrambled to cover the story. Live updates flooded feeds. News anchors tried to parse official statements, decipher legal jargon, and predict the fallout. Social media, faster than any traditional outlet, created a continuous stream of debate, commentary, and speculation. Meanwhile, palace aides, traditionally trained to handle crises with discretion and diplomacy, faced an unprecedented challenge, containing a story that had already exploded beyond any control they could hope to exert. The situation was further complicated by Meghan's public persona. She had cultivated a unique blend of celebrity and royal responsibility, walking a tightrope that few had attempted. Every move she made was magnified by a media ecosystem hungry for scandal and revelation. In stripping her of titles and privileges, the monarchy not only sent a message about rules and authority, but also directly challenged her public identity, her position as both a media figure and a royal icon. It was a high-stakes clash of institutions, reputations, and personalities. And yet, even in this moment of apparent finality, the story was far from over. There were whispers of private meetings, leaked conversations, and strategic consultations that hinted at deeper layers to the decision. What exactly had Meghan done, or not done, that prompted such a decisive action from the king? What were the unseen pressures, the conversations behind closed doors, and the calculated risks that shaped this unprecedented ruling? These questions loomed large, creating a tension that no public announcement could fully capture. The human element cannot be overstated. Titles and privileges are symbols, but the real impact is deeply personal. For Meghan, it meant a sudden loss of status, protection, and recognition within an institution she had married into with hope and ambition. For Harry, it meant navigating the emotional terrain of loyalty, love, and filial duty under the relentless scrutiny of the public eye. For King Charles, it meant asserting authority while managing the potential fallout. Personal, political, and public. Every decision, every word, and every public statement carried consequences that rippled far beyond the palace walls. Even as the world reacted in real time, the palace prepared for the next moves. Statements were drafted, schedules adjusted, and media strategies planned. Legal teams consulted, advisors prepared contingency plans, and royal aides worked to anticipate every scenario. But no amount of preparation could fully contain the human drama unfolding behind the carefully curated facade. The monarchy, while an institution of centuries, is ultimately made of people. People whose ambitions, fears, and loyalties collide in ways that shape history in unpredictable ways. And then there was the suspense. What would Meghan do next? Would she accept the decision quietly, seek reconciliation, or challenge it publicly? The possibilities were endless, and every option carried risk. Observers speculated, insiders whispered, and the global audience waited with bated breath. Each second brought new developments, new rumors, and new opportunities for both drama and revelation. The story had entered a new phase, one where the personal, the political, and the public were intertwined more tightly than ever before. In short, the announcement did not just make headlines. It shattered expectations, rewrote relationships, and created a narrative tension that would dominate global media for weeks, if not months. And while the statement itself was clear, the story behind it, the motivations, the secrets, the decisions, remained tantalizingly out of reach. It is in that space, between public knowledge and private reality, that the true drama unfolds. So, as we step into this story, ask yourself, what would you do if a single announcement could redefine your identity, alter your legacy, and place you under the relentless gaze of the world? How would you navigate the storm of public opinion, family expectations, and personal ambition? And perhaps most importantly, what unseen forces are at play behind the polished doors of the palace? Forces that could change everything in ways no one yet imagines? She was born into a world far removed from palaces, crowns, and centuries-old traditions. Meghan Markle's early life in Los Angeles was one of ambition, creativity, and the pursuit of personal freedom. She grew up navigating the complexities of race, identity, and fame in a city defined by dreams and relentless competition. Acting classes, auditions, and small television roles filled her teenage and young adult years. She knew rejection early, learned resilience, and developed a persona that balanced vulnerability with undeniable charisma. But even in those formative years, few could have predicted the seismic trajectory her life would take, a trajectory that would ultimately place her in the center of a global monarchy and, eventually, under its harshest scrutiny. From the moment Meghan stepped onto the screen, she exhibited a rare blend of talent and presence. Her breakout role on the legal drama Suits positioned her as a rising star. Audiences were drawn to her combination of elegance, intelligence, and relatability. But fame, as she would quickly learn, comes with a cost. The public and media obsession that would later define her royal years had already started its roots in Hollywood, a world where every misstep, every rumor, and every personal choice was analyzed, judged, and magnified. It was during this period that Meghan began to cultivate a sense of purpose beyond acting. Humanitarian work, advocacy for women's rights, and global awareness became central to her identity. She was not just a performer. She was a communicator, a connector, a woman aware of her influence and willing to wield it. And yet, the path from Hollywood stardom to royal duty was far from straightforward. Few imagined that an actress, accustomed to the bright lights of California, would one day walk the halls of Kensington Palace, shoulder to shoulder with princes and dukes, navigating centuries-old traditions she had never encountered. The moment that shifted everything was, of course, her meeting with Prince Harry. A chance encounter, as the story often tells it, quickly blossomed into a high-profile romance that captured the world's imagination. There was a fairy tale quality to it. The prince who had lived his life under the gaze of the public, I found a partner who was both independent and captivating, someone unafraid to step into a world that few could truly understand. But the reality was far more complicated. Marrying into the British royal family is not merely a personal decision. It is a public one, a political one, a historical one. Every gesture, every word, every association becomes part of a legacy, scrutinized not just by the media, but by centuries of institutional expectation. The courtship itself became an international spectacle. Paparazzi followed every outing, tabloids speculated endlessly, and social media dissected every glance. Meghan, accustomed to the scrutiny of Hollywood, faced a new level of public intensity. One in which the rules were unwritten, the expectations rigid, and the consequences for missteps magnified exponentially. She quickly learned that charm and intelligence could only carry her so far. There were codes to follow, hierarchies to respect, and traditions to honor. And every day brought the question, could she adapt, survive, and ultimately thrive within this world? Their engagement was announced with fanfare befitting a royal fairy tale. The public adored her. Some saw her as a breath of fresh air for the monarchy, a modern, relatable figure capable of bridging old traditions with contemporary values. Others were skeptical, wary of an outsider altering the delicate balance of power, protocol, and perception. Meghan was thrust into a world where appearances mattered as much as intentions, where every smile could be dissected for motive, and where loyalty was measured against invisible standards only insiders could fully comprehend. The wedding itself was both a personal milestone and a global media event. Millions watched as Meghan Markle, in a dress designed by a renowned British designer, walked through the historic chapel, joined by the gaze of royalty, dignitaries, and citizens alike. It was a spectacle, a triumph, and a signal that the world was ready for a new kind of royal. Yet even in those moments of grandeur, cracks were forming. Small, almost imperceptible tensions between Meghan and the inner workings of the family, between personal ambition and institutional expectation. These cracks would, over time, grow into fissures and eventually into the dramatic confrontations that led to the announcement we know today. Early in her royal tenure, Meghan faced what many outsiders would consider routine, mastering protocol, learning the nuances of ceremonial events, and adapting to a life in which privacy was almost non-existent. But to Meghan, these challenges were compounded by the constant public scrutiny of her every move. Hairstyles, wardrobe choices, even casual gestures were critiqued relentlessly. Headlines labeled her ambitious, outspoken, or difficult, Social media erupted with praise or scorn, creating a relentless feedback loop that few could withstand. She was navigating not only the demands of a new family, but the expectations of a global audience, and the pressure was enormous. But Meghan's journey was not solely about adaptation. It was also about impact. She championed causes, visited schools, supported charities, and used her platform to address issues like gender equality, mental health, and social justice. Her actions, however well-intentioned, were not always embraced within the palace. Traditionalists viewed her visibility and independence with suspicion, questioning her motives and her influence. To some, she was a breath of fresh air. To others, she was a disruption to centuries of carefully curated royal conduct. The duality of her public perception would come to define much of the tension that ultimately led to her loss of titles and privileges. By the time the Sussexes announced their intention to step back from senior royal duties, Meghan had already become a polarizing figure. Supporters hailed her bravery, her willingness to challenge entrenched norms, and her commitment to carving out an independent identity. Critics argued that she had overstepped boundaries, created public controversies, and undermined the unity of the family. The narrative was no longer simple. Meghan was no longer merely a princess. She was a symbol, a lightning rod for debate, and a subject whose every action was politicized, scrutinized, and sensationalized. Her transition to life outside the traditional structures of the monarchy was complicated further by media dynamics. Netflix projects, public interviews, and philanthropic endeavors signaled an independence that the palace had rarely seen before. Every initiative she undertook was interpreted not just as a personal endeavor, but as a statement about her role, influence, and potential ambitions. Insiders whispered that some of these actions, combined with perceived slights or breaches of protocol, contributed to the palace's ultimate decision to strip her of her royal titles. And yet, even in the face of mounting criticism, Meghan maintained a remarkable degree of composure. She navigated complex relationships, high-pressure public appearances, and global scrutiny with intelligence and determination. Her journey from Hollywood actress to controversial royal was not linear. It was filled with triumphs, missteps, lessons, and challenges. But it was also a journey marked by courage, by the willingness to stand her ground, and by the realization that stepping into the royal spotlight meant surrendering control over much of one's personal narrative. It is impossible to understand the announcement stripping her titles without understanding the path that brought her here. Meghan's story is a mix of ambition, talent, risk, and resilience. It is a story about someone who dared to enter a world that was fundamentally not designed for her, and the consequences that followed when tradition collided with modernity, public expectation with personal ambition, and family loyalty with institutional authority. But even after years of adaptation, service, and public scrutiny, the reality is this: Meghan Markle's journey through the royal family was always going to be fraught with tension. The very qualities that made her captivating, influential, and transformative also made her a lightning rod for controversy. Every success was magnified, every misstep scrutinized, and every decision politicized. And now, with the recent announcement, the world has been forced to confront the culmination of that journey, a moment of unprecedented public reckoning that will define her life for years to come. And yet, despite all that we know, there remain questions that linger in the shadows. What were the private conversations that shaped her path? What were the palace dynamics, unseen by the public, that ultimately led to this decision? How did Prince Harry navigate the tension between loyalty to his wife and duty to his father? And, most importantly, how will Meghan respond in the face of a public and personal upheaval that is arguably unparalleled in modern royal history? The announcement had reverberated across the globe, but within the walls of the royal estates, the impact was deeply personal. For Prince Harry, the decision to strip Meghan Markle of her titles was not just a headline. It was a seismic emotional earthquake, shaking the foundations of his personal life, his identity, and his role within the monarchy. Harry's life had always been a balancing act between duty and personal desire, between public expectation and private loyalty. But this moment represented a collision of all those forces at once, a point at which the weight of centuries-old tradition and the loyalty to the woman he loved were irreconcilably intertwined. Harry's journey to this point had been shaped by decades of public scrutiny and personal loss. From the moment he entered the world as the younger son of Princess Diana and Prince Charles, his life was defined by the glare of the media and the expectations of royalty. He grew up in a household where every move was watched, where every mistake was amplified, and where love and loss were deeply entangled. His mother's tragic death left an indelible mark, one that would inform his approach to family, loyalty, and the pressures of public life. Every decision he made as an adult, from military service to personal relationships, was filtered through the lens of a world that demanded perfection while often delivering judgment. When Harry met Meghan, there was a sense of relief and hope. Here was someone who seemed to understand the pressures he faced, someone independent, intelligent, and unafraid to stand beside him in the glare of global attention. Their connection was instant, intense, and transformative. Yet marrying into the royal family meant more than love. It meant navigating centuries of protocol, tradition, and unspoken rules. And Harry, despite his experience with public life, soon discovered that loyalty to his wife and loyalty to his family could collide in ways he had never anticipated. The fallout began almost immediately. As Meghan stepped into her role, Harry found himself mediating between his wife's vision of modern royal life and the expectations of the palace. Their marriage, though rooted in genuine affection, became a battleground of competing pressures. Every charitable initiative, every public appearance, every media interview was scrutinized not just for content, but for subtext, intention, and alignment with royal norms. Critics accused Meghan of being ambitious and outspoken, while some traditionalists suggested that Harry had been unduly influenced by his wife's perspective. Yet from Harry's point of view, he was simply trying to protect and support the person he loved, navigating a world in which rules were both rigid and invisible. The decision to step back from senior royal duties, the so-called Megxit, was one of the most significant moments in this saga. Harry and Meghan chose to carve out a degree of independence, seeking financial autonomy and freedom from the relentless pressures of royal life. But the move was met with intense backlash. Media outlets questioned loyalty, the palace expressed concern, and the public was divided. For Harry, this was not just a professional decision. It was a deeply personal one, a declaration of support for Meghan, a choice that would forever alter his relationship with the monarchy and his place within it. As tensions escalated, Harry found himself under constant pressure. Advisors, courtiers, and family members all had opinions, and many questioned his judgment. Some urged reconciliation with the palace, others warned of long-term consequences, and a few cautioned that Meghan's rising profile outside royal confines could provoke institutional retaliation. Through it all, Harry remained steadfast in his loyalty. Yet loyalty comes at a cost, and the unfolding drama made it clear that the stakes were higher than ever before. The announcement stripping Meghan of her titles was a direct blow not just to her, but to Harry as well. It raised questions about his judgment, his influence, and his role within the family. Was he complicit in perceived breaches of protocol? Could he have intervened more effectively? And most importantly, how would he support Meghan through a situation that placed her under global scrutiny, while simultaneously challenging his relationship with his father, the king? These questions were not theoretical. They were lived realities, unfolding in real time and under the relentless gaze of the public eye. Private conversations within the palace revealed the complexity of the situation. Advisors and courtiers debated strategy, weighing public perception against family loyalty. Some argued for measured statements, others for decisive action. The internal dynamics were tense, emotional, and at times volatile. Harry, caught between the duty to his family and the desire to protect his wife, faced moments of intense emotional strain. Reports suggest long nights spent discussing strategy, navigating media leaks, and weighing every potential repercussion. Every decision was fraught with risk, and the margin for error was virtually non-existent. Meanwhile, Harry's relationship with King Charles was under unprecedented strain. What had been a bond built on family ties and shared history became a complex negotiation of authority, respect, and disagreement. The king's decision to remove Meghan's titles, though framed as a measure to preserve protocol and tradition, was deeply personal in its impact. For Harry, it was not just a policy choice. It was a symbolic act that tested the boundaries of loyalty, love, and family hierarchy. How does a son reconcile personal loyalty with filial duty when the two appear to be in direct conflict? For Harry, there were no easy answers. Media scrutiny compounded the pressure. Every action, facial expression, and public statement by Harry was analyzed for meaning. The world speculated. Was he angry? Sad? Resigned? Supportive? Each interpretation carried weight, influencing public perception and shaping the narrative around both him and Meghan. The couple's every move became a signal, a reflection of internal dynamics, and a subject of intense debate. Harry, who had grown accustomed to the pressures of public life, now faced a situation where personal loyalty and institutional expectation collided with unprecedented intensity. But even as Harry navigated this landscape, he remained focused on one thing: Meghan. His loyalty was unwavering, his support steadfast. Whether negotiating with advisors, strategizing public appearances, or privately comforting his wife, Harry's actions reflected a commitment to protect and support the woman he had chosen to marry. Yet loyalty is rarely straightforward, and in the context of royalty, it comes with consequences that ripple far beyond the personal sphere. Every decision he made had implications for the monarchy, the public, and the global media narrative. The fallout extended beyond family and media. Public perception played a significant role in shaping events. Supporters praised Harry's dedication to Meghan, viewing his actions as a stand against outdated traditions and institutional rigidity. Critics framed him as a passive observer or even an enabler, complicit in actions that had supposedly disrupted royal cohesion. The narrative became polarized, creating a feedback loop in which public opinion influenced internal palace dynamics and vice versa. Harry, navigating this dual pressure, had to balance personal values with strategic considerations in a way few could fully comprehend. In many ways, Harry's role in the Sussex fallout illustrates the tension between love and duty. Marrying Meghan brought immense joy, but it also brought extraordinary responsibility. Supporting her meant confronting the full force of the monarchy's expectations. It meant managing global media scrutiny and handling complex internal politics. And ultimately, it meant facing a decision by the king that challenged both his loyalty and his capacity to influence outcomes. The emotional and psychological toll was immense, highlighting the human cost behind headlines and viral clips. Despite these pressures, Harry's actions were consistent with his long-standing approach: protect family, uphold personal values, and navigate public life with a sense of purpose. He engaged with advisors, sought to mediate conflicts, and maintained a close connection with Meghan. But even the strongest loyalty can be tested, and the decision to strip Meghan of titles represented the ultimate challenge, a scenario that placed him squarely at the intersection of family, institution, and personal morality. Yet, as tumultuous as these developments were, they were only the beginning. Behind closed doors, palace meetings, strategic conversations, and private deliberations continued to shape the unfolding story. Harry's next moves, both public and private, would influence not only Meghan's response but the broader perception of the monarchy itself. And while the world watched with fascination, few could grasp the full complexity of what was happening behind the velvet curtains, in rooms where centuries of tradition and raw human emotion collided. The question remained: could Harry navigate these treacherous waters without compromising his love, his values, or his relationship with the monarchy? Could he protect Meghan while maintaining a connection to a family and institution that had long defined his life? And most importantly, what choices would he make in the moments immediately following the announcement? A decision that would shape the next chapter of this unprecedented royal saga? By the time the palace announcement hit, Meghan Markle's public persona had already evolved far beyond the traditional expectations of royalty. No longer just the Duchess of Sussex, she had become a global media figure, an influencer, activist, and content creator. Central to this transformation was her partnership with Netflix, a platform that promised creative freedom, global reach, and, most importantly, independence. But this very independence, the ability to produce, direct, and influence media narratives, would also become a source of tension, conflict, and eventual controversy with the monarchy. The Netflix partnership was announced with much fanfare. Meghan and Harry promised to produce documentaries, scripted series, and educational content aimed at inspiring positive social change. It was framed as a continuation of their philanthropic vision, a way to leverage celebrity influence for good. Yet, from the perspective of palace insiders, the deal carried complications. A streaming platform offers global visibility, control over narrative and messaging, something the monarchy had never needed to consider in its centuries of existence. The very notion that Meghan could shape public perception on her own terms was seen as both unprecedented and threatening to traditional protocols. Immediately, speculation arose. What would Meghan produce? Would her content critique, directly or indirectly, the institution she was once part of? Would her documentaries or scripted series subtly challenge traditions, protocols, or family decisions? These were not idle concerns. The monarchy operates under strict expectations regarding public statements, appearances, and image management. Any independent media project by a royal or former royal could have ramifications for the family's reputation and the public's perception of its cohesion. And then came the reports, whispers of scripts, storylines, and documentaries that touched sensitive issues: mental health within the royal family, gender inequality, and media intrusion. Each project, whether factual or fictionalized, was interpreted as a potential critique of the monarchy. Advisors and courtiers debated endlessly. Could Meghan's content be managed? Could contracts be negotiated to limit sensitive disclosures? Or was the very nature of creative freedom incompatible with royal expectations? The answer, ultimately, would prove decisive. Netflix's involvement amplified the stakes. Unlike traditional media coverage, which can be controlled through statements, press releases, and managed appearances, streaming platforms allow direct-to-consumer communication. Meghan could, in theory, reach millions without palace mediation, setting narratives on her terms. From the monarchy's perspective, this represented both opportunity and risk. Opportunity, because a former royal could use her platform to highlight charitable causes, global issues, and social initiatives. Risk, because the same platform could also reveal private grievances, challenge institutional narratives, or influence public perception in ways that were uncontrollable. The palace's response was cautious at first. Advisors attempted to monitor developments, ensure compliance with non-disclosure agreements, and maintain a semblance of control over messaging. But as projects progressed, tensions escalated. Every update, leaked scripts, announcements of documentaries, hints of socially charged content, was scrutinized for subtext. Did Meghan intend to critique the royal family? Was she subtly pointing out flaws, inequities, or betrayals? While some insiders saw her media ventures as benign or philanthropic, others viewed them as potential destabilizing factors that needed addressing. Public perception added another layer. Social media debates raged over the propriety of Meghan's content. Supporters praised her entrepreneurial spirit and commitment to causes. Critics condemned her for overstepping, suggesting that former royals should avoid independent media ventures that could impact family reputation. The polarization created a feedback loop. Every move Meghan made was analyzed, judged, and politicized, increasing pressure on both her and Harry to manage consequences carefully. Financial independence was a major factor in this dynamic. Netflix deals, speaking engagements, and media projects provided revenue streams that reduced the couple's reliance on the monarchy for funding. While this independence offered freedom, it also challenged traditional power structures. Historically, royals depend on institutional allowances, ceremonial stipends, and trust funds. Meghan's ability to generate her own income and dictate public messaging shifted the balance of influence, creating tension not only between her and the palace, but also among advisors who feared precedent for future generations. Then came the leaks. Rumors circulated about meetings between Netflix executives and palace staff, tense negotiations about content approvals, and disagreements over how much influence Meghan could exercise. Each leak fueled speculation about palace unrest and hinted at conflicts that were otherwise invisible to the public eye. The narrative shifted subtly but decisively. This was not merely a matter of celebrity ambition. It was a confrontation between tradition and modern media influence, between royal discretion and creative freedom. One particularly sensitive topic reportedly included Meghan's interest in addressing mental health and media intrusion. While framed as socially responsible, palace insiders were wary. The British tabloids had been both a source of criticism and control for the monarchy for decades. A royal, or former royal, using a streaming platform to discuss these issues could ignite public debate in ways that were unpredictable and potentially damaging. Each project was a balancing act between advocacy, public perception, and institutional protocol. And yet, Meghan pressed forward. She and Harry were committed to their vision, using their platform to inspire change, address global issues, and redefine what it meant to be a royal, or former royal, in the modern world. Their intentions, however, were constantly interpreted through multiple lenses: supporter, critic, media, and institution. What may have seemed like a philanthropic or creative endeavor to them was often viewed as a challenge, a provocation, or even a threat to the monarchy's authority. The tension came to a head when confidential palace briefings reportedly flagged the Netflix projects as high risk. Advisors debated whether Meghan's independence could be tolerated within the institution's framework. Some argued that her projects should be encouraged, emphasizing her positive influence and ability to modernize public perception. Others suggested that limits were necessary, emphasizing precedent, tradition, and the potential for reputational harm. The debate was heated, emotionally charged, and fraught with implications for the family, the public, and Meghan herself. At the center of this debate, of course, was Harry. His support for Meghan was unwavering, yet he was acutely aware of the stakes. He understood the risks, the scrutiny, and the institutional resistance. He balanced the dual pressures of protecting his wife's autonomy while navigating the delicate dynamics of the monarchy. Every decision he made carried implications not just for the couple, but for the entire royal family. And while he maintained his focus on loyalty, he also recognized that the couple's future, both public and private, was now inseparably linked to Meghan's media endeavors. As tensions escalated, whispers of private meetings, legal consultations, and strategic interventions grew louder. Could the palace tolerate this level of independence? Would compromises be possible? Or had the trajectory of Meghan's media ventures, coupled with her increasingly public visibility, created a situation where decisive action was inevitable? The pieces were aligning, and the stage was being set for a confrontation that would alter the course of both Meghan's life and the monarchy itself. The public, meanwhile, remained captivated. Every announcement, rumor, or update about Meghan's projects fueled speculation. Headlines splintered into narratives of ambition, rebellion, and empowerment. Social media campaigns debated morality, loyalty, and protocol. News outlets dissected potential implications for the monarchy, suggesting that the Netflix effect was not just a career move. It was a structural challenge to centuries of tradition. And as the global audience consumed every detail, the pressure on Meghan and Harry intensified exponentially. By the time King Charles delivered the final announcement stripping Meghan of her titles, the Netflix effect had already created a perfect storm. Her independence, visibility, and creative control, once celebrated, were now framed as catalysts for a decisive institutional response. The projects that symbolized freedom, advocacy, and ambition had, in the eyes of some insiders, crossed a line. The monarchy's decision was not merely about protocol. It was about influence, perception, and the preservation of an institution in the face of unprecedented modern challenges. And yet, even in this moment, there were questions that remained unanswered. How much did Meghan's media projects truly influence the king's decision? Were there other factors behind the scenes, unseen and unreported? How would Netflix respond? And what would this mean for the couple's future creative endeavors? And perhaps most critically, how would Meghan herself navigate the fallout, both personally and publicly, in a landscape that had now grown exponentially more complex and unpredictable? The answers would unfold in ways that no one could predict. The Netflix effect, which had begun as a symbol of independence and empowerment, had become a central thread in the drama that now enveloped the Sussexes. Inside the walls of Buckingham Palace, the air was thick with tension. Whispers ricocheted through hallways lined with centuries of history, every secretive glance and hushed conversation carrying the weight of the monarchy's legacy. The palace is a world where loyalty is currency, discretion is law, and missteps are magnified into scandals. And in the wake of Meghan Markle's growing independence, her Netflix projects, and the inevitable fallout, that delicate ecosystem was beginning to fracture. Royal advisors, the gatekeepers of protocol and strategy, found themselves at the center of a storm. Their days, once measured by careful planning and controlled messaging, now revolved around damage control, leak investigation, and crisis management. Every email, every briefing, every whispered conversation was scrutinized for signs of disloyalty or strategic misalignment. Trust, a rare and precious commodity in the palace, became even more fragile. The first signs of internal conflict were subtle. An advisor accidentally misquoted in the press, a leak about Meghan's alleged media ambitions, a story floating anonymously about private conversations within the family. Individually, each incident might have been dismissed as minor, but collectively, they painted a picture of a palace at war with itself, a network of alliances, rivalries, and hidden agendas quietly shaping the monarchy's response to the Sussexes. Leaked information, in particular, became a weapon of choice. Anonymous briefings to sympathetic journalists, subtle narrative framing, and selective disclosures allowed certain advisors to influence public perception without ever stepping into the spotlight. And with Meghan's media ventures already drawing global attention, every leak had the potential to escalate tensions, manipulate public opinion, and provoke responses from both the palace and the couple. Some insiders viewed leaks as necessary. They were a tool to test public reaction, gauge loyalty, and pressure decision-makers. Others saw them as outright betrayal, a violation of trust that could destabilize the monarchy at a critical moment. The truth, as is often the case in royal circles, was somewhere in between. Politics, personal loyalty, and self-preservation intertwined, creating a web of intrigue that would leave even seasoned observers stunned. Meghan herself became a lightning rod for speculation. Every new leak, whether about her media deals, personal interactions, or public statements, was dissected for motive and meaning. Critics suggested she had orchestrated some leaks herself to shape narrative. Supporters argued she was the target of an orchestrated campaign to undermine her credibility. The palace, meanwhile, had to navigate a delicate balance, controlling the story while maintaining discretion, all while facing an audience of millions demanding answers. Advisors debated every possible move. Should they confront leaks directly, issuing statements that might inflame the situation? Should they attempt to manage perception through controlled narratives, or allow rumors to circulate, trusting that time and context would clarify the truth? Each choice carried risk, and the stakes were enormous. Every leak, every whisper, every shadowed conversation had implications not just for Meghan, but for Harry, King Charles, and the monarchy as a whole. The personal stakes were equally high. Some advisors were loyal to the king, others sympathetic to the Sussexes. Some were motivated by principle, others by ambition. Alliances shifted quietly, strategies evolved, and behind closed doors, emotions ran high. The palace, often portrayed as a seamless institution of poise and ceremony, was in reality a pressure cooker of competing priorities, personal rivalries, and deeply held beliefs about loyalty, tradition, and influence. Amid this tension, the Sussexes watched closely. Harry, ever protective, was keenly aware of how leaks could influence both public perception and internal decision-making. Meghan, meanwhile, had experienced the relentless glare of media scrutiny before entering the monarchy and was acutely attuned to the subtle ways in which information could be weaponized. Together, they were navigating not only the pressures of the announcement stripping her titles, but also the labyrinthine politics of the palace itself. The concept of betrayal became a central theme. Advisors who were once trusted confidants now became potential threats. Private conversations were treated with suspicion. Loyalty was tested with every briefing, email, and report. The palace, an institution built on centuries of hierarchy and decorum, was suddenly facing internal dynamics that threatened its cohesion. And while the public might have seen only headlines and official statements, the reality behind the palace walls was far more intricate. and far more volatile. Legal teams were drawn into the drama as well. Leaks sometimes contained sensitive or confidential information that could impact contracts, media agreements, or the financial arrangements of the Sussexes. Lawyers and consultants worked feverishly to assess potential damage, advise on strategy, and preempt any public fallout. Every move required precision, diplomacy, and timing. One misstep could escalate a minor leak into a full-blown scandal with international implications. The role of the media cannot be understated. Journalists, accustomed to palace intrigue, were quick to amplify even minor hints of tension. Headlines framed leaks as betrayals, strategic miscalculations, or deliberate provocations. The cycle of rumor and reporting fed itself, creating an environment in which palace advisors had to operate with extreme caution. One leak could change the narrative overnight, force decisions that would have long-term consequences, and influence the very trajectory of the Sussexes' future. And yet, amid this complex network of intrigue, one fact remained clear. The palace was under pressure not just from external forces, but from within. Advisors, courtiers, and confidants, all tasked with upholding the integrity of the monarchy, were now operating in a fractured environment where loyalty, ambition, and self-interest collided. Decisions were no longer straightforward. Every choice, every word, every signal carried amplified consequences. And for Meghan and Harry, this internal turbulence only heightened the uncertainty surrounding their position, their influence, and their security. The culmination of these tensions, personal, institutional, and public, set the stage for the king's unprecedented decision. The stripping of Meghan's titles and privileges was not an isolated event. It was the product of months, perhaps years, of internal conflict, leaks, and strategic maneuvering. Advisors had weighed every angle, leaks had shaped perception, and palace politics had converged to create a moment of decisive action. The announcement, while public, was deeply rooted in this complex web of intrigue. And yet, even after the announcement, the palace drama did not end. Whispers continued, leaks persisted, and speculation remained rampant. Advisors who had once been influential suddenly found themselves sidelined. New alliances formed. Strategies evolved in response to public reaction. The palace, as always, adapted, but the scars of internal conflict would linger, influencing decisions, relationships, and public narratives for years to come. For Meghan and Harry, the lesson was clear. The monarchy is not just an institution of ceremony and tradition. It is a battlefield of influence, perception, and power. Navigating it requires not only charisma and strategy, but also resilience, courage, and the ability to anticipate the unseen forces shaping every decision. Every advisor, every leak, every whispered conversation had consequences that rippled far beyond the walls of the palace, touching lives, reputations, and legacies in profound ways. And so, as the world digested the shock of the announcement, a subtler, more insidious drama was unfolding behind the scenes. Who was loyal? Who had betrayed? Which leaks were accidental and which were strategic? And how would the Sussexes respond to a palace environment that had grown increasingly complex, volatile, and, in many ways, hostile? As news of King Charles's announcement hit the headlines, the world erupted in a frenzy. Social media exploded, breaking records for trending topics, hashtags, and search queries. Millions of people across continents clicked, commented, shared, and debated. Sometimes in support of Meghan Markle, sometimes in condemnation, and often in sheer disbelief. The reaction was immediate, global, and unprecedented, illustrating just how intertwined royalty and media had become in the modern age. Within minutes, news channels scrambled to cover the story, offering rolling updates, expert panels, and analysis from pundits who dissected every angle. Newspapers printed special editions. Tabloids ran screaming headlines about betrayal, scandal, and royal wrath. Even lifestyle magazines, usually reserved for fashion and leisure, jumped on the narrative, speculating about Meghan's emotional state, Harry's reaction, and the future of the monarchy. The media frenzy was not simply about reporting facts. It was about constructing a narrative, one that would frame public perception for weeks, months, and potentially years. Social media, however, took the story to a level that traditional media could not match. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook became arenas for global debate. Memes, videos, and live reactions circulated instantly. Supporters of Meghan framed the announcement as an act of injustice, a continuation of systemic scrutiny and mistreatment. Opponents viewed it as a necessary correction, a reinforcement of royal tradition and accountability. Every post, tweet, and comment added fuel to the fire, creating a digital storm that no one, neither palace nor couple, could fully control. Public outrage was particularly pronounced in countries with strong ties to the monarchy. In the United Kingdom, debates over loyalty, privilege, and family duty dominated news cycles. Opinion polls fluctuated as the public grappled with competing narratives. Some argued that Meghan had overstepped boundaries and that the monarchy's decision was justified. Others criticized what they perceived as institutional cruelty, framing the action as punitive, disproportionate, and emblematic of outdated power structures. Internationally, reactions varied but were equally intense. In the United States, Meghan's home country, many media outlets and commentators portrayed the decision as unfair, citing her philanthropic work, advocacy, and global influence. Late-night shows, podcasts, and news commentary dissected every detail, often framing the story as a clash between modernity and tradition, celebrity culture and historical institution. In Canada, Australia, and other Commonwealth nations, the discourse was nuanced, balancing respect for the monarchy with concern over fairness, media intrusion, and public perception. The media frenzy was also amplified by leaks and insider commentary. Anonymous palace sources provided exclusive insights into the motivations behind the king's decision, Meghan's alleged behavior, and the strategic considerations of advisors. Each leak, whether accurate or speculative, was immediately amplified by news outlets eager for breaking stories. The effect was